Welcome to Alligator Preserves. I'm your host, Laurel McCarg, and I have a most special guest for you today. I know I always say that, but this guest is all the way from Australia. I would like to introduce you all to Adam Jones. Adam, welcome to Alligator Preserves.
Thanks so much for having me, Laurel. It's a pleasure to be here and speaking with you.
The pleasure is really mine. Now, I'm just going to let everybody know right off the bat that we're going to be talking about you, your goals, your partner who's not here with you today, who should be Adam Ashto, but we're going to be talking about the book that you two just published. The SH Star T, They Never Taught You What You Can Learn from Books. And your name's first, Adam Jones. And Adam Ashton's name is second. So I was going to ask you about that in a minute, but you go by Jonesy, yes?
That's right. Yeah. So both of us names Adam. So I'll go Jonesy and Ashto.
Nice. Well, check this out. And if you're just listening to me, you're going to have to go to the YouTube version to see this. This book is fabulous and filled with so many things that we're going to get to. So first of all, good morning. It's what, 7 o'clock in the morning?
7 a.m. for us. So I just woke up, had my morning workout, meditated, read a book for a little bit, had breakfast, and now I'm sitting with you. So yeah, I love my mornings.
You had a full morning. What time do you wake up?
I wake up at 5 a.m. So I never used to wake up at 5, but I recently read a book, The 5 a.m. Club. Not the best book in the world, but in the sense of how it articulates and how the actual book, it's got a lot of fat in it, I guess. But at the end of the day, it got me to wake up at 5 a.m., sold the whole idea to me. And for the last 3 months, I've been up at 5 a.m. every day and making sure I'm just getting off to the right routine to start the day.
I think I ought to look into that. Now, you and Adam Ashton have a podcast called What You Will Learn. Tell our audience a little bit about your podcast. We've been listening. My husband and I have been listening to you for years now.
Oh, wonderful. So good to hear. So we started about 5 or 6 years ago now, where Ashto and I, so we first met working at a pub. It was called the Tudor Inn, just a real old scungy sort of pub in a off streets of Melbourne somewhere. And at that stage, we neither of us really connected on books, but we were kind of mates. Went out for a couple of drinks a couple of times, as you do with work buddies after working at a pub. But then we crossed paths again a few years later, and that was when I was at university. At that stage, I'd read my first most impactful book of my life at the time, and I was sitting there reading How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Ashto was so I was at a pub. We were drinking. I was having a beer at a pub with one hand, and the other hand I had the book. And Ashto was there, and he totally got it. And we were the same breed of person, really. So from there, we really kicked it off, and we kept catching up to talk about what book we're reading at the moment, what we're learning from the book. And then that's how it evolved into the podcast. We thought, why not just record these conversations at the very start? And that's what we did. We did it quick and dirty, put no effort into the recording, didn't think anyone was going to listen. We just recorded for ourselves and nobody else. And then over time, it evolved as we started growing audience. We got feedback on how to improve, and we improved over time. And here we are, 5 or 6 years into the podcast now, and still going strong and loving it.
You say improved over time. Now, I have to laugh with you. I think I'm laughing with you, not at you. But your earlier episodes, were you guys like Wayne's World fans with the party on excellent, doing your little song renditions at the end of your podcast? Whose idea was that?
Oh God, I think that was like on episode 3 or 4, because we were just absolutely winging it. We were just having some fun, and then I think it just started. Let's just put a beat on and just see what happens. The first song was like 20 seconds, just recounting to a beat, and then it got wild. So we used to go on YouTube, download any sort of tune that kind of linked to the book. We didn't listen to what the tune was going to be, and then we just hit play and just started singing a song about what we learned from the book. And yeah, at first, some of them really, really worked okay, we think, but some of them were quite putrid. And we only found out once we started getting listener stats of our actual episodes. We would have performed very well. Everyone would listen to the whole lot. And then at the very end, it almost climbed to plummet to zero, and everyone just stopped listening to the songs that we thought we were so fantastic for. Some of them are shocking. We need to delete them. Yeah,
they're humorous for sure. I mean, if you haven't listened to any of these podcasts, go out there and listen to some of the early ones because they're very entertaining. Now, someone is calling, and this is not my office, so I'm just going to pick it up and put it down. Hang on.
That's all
Hang
good.
on. I forgot to ask them how to mute the thing in here, but anyway.
Maybe we
All
can
right, so
have them join.
the SH star T they never taught you. Why in the 21st century? Yeah. Do we still have to put a star there? Like, do we think that people don't know what this word is? Did you have problems with the title of this book, with publishing it with this title?
That's a good question. We've had a few interviews on, say, mainstream media in Australia, and they've all come up with a different way to get around the star. So we had
Stuff.
Shizen, the stuff, the Shizen, someone said, like you said, the S star IT. So we had a few issues, but it just stuck because the way we came up with the title, we were what 70 or 80% through the book, and I was trying to explain it to a mate as we were going for a walk together, and I was trying to explain it, what it's about, and I was like, the S, they never taught you they never taught you, right? And he goes, man, that's a pretty incredible name for a book. It sounds pretty good. I'm like, hey, I think that's it. It covers what we're talking about. So, yeah, since then we haven't had too much of an issue, but we thought if we just had the blatant swear word there, we might have a few issues, getting into stores and getting online search and things like that.
And isn't that just strange now? Isn't that just weird?
It is. But yeah, the word should be in the dictionary, and it's a pretty common word that everybody uses, including kids. So it is a little bit strange, I think, Laura.
It is. Anyway, we'll get past that. When you two got together and were doing your podcast, you had lots of goals. You wanted to read more, obviously. You've met that goal. I think, you've both read more than 400 books, I think?
I'd say in that range. For me, probably 300 to 400. I've kind of lost count. But the Goodreads says 300, and I don't account everything on Goodreads. I forget a lot of the time.
Right. And then you wanted to improve your retention. Now, how do you measure that?
I think retention's the biggest one. Before starting the podcast, I especially I'd read the book and get to the very end, and I just totally forgot what I just read. And someone would ask me, have you read that book? What's it about? And then I'll just fumble across my words and be like, you know what? I mustn't really got much out of it. So retention comes in a few ways for us. So I think reading it's one layer, but then another layer is going back through it and going through all the highlights and notes. And then another layer beyond that is actually structuring the notes and discussing with Astro before an episode. And then when we actually record the episode, that's a fourth layer. And then when we used to edit, and now when we just listen back to the episode, that's a fifth layer. So you're going over the wide net at the start. You're bringing it down to the best parts that you learned from the book, and then from that you're just layering on top of that, and to the point where it's much simpler to remember everything you've read over time. So that was one of the plans at the start, just for retention to ourselves. And yeah, it's really helped that. And I recommend anyone who loves reading, you don't have to go through the 5 or 6 layers like we go through, but pulling out the highlighter, and like you have, I saw you had dog tags on our book. Yeah, that's it. So, and you're actively reading, so you're really looking for the stuff that resonates, and then later you can go back to it and remind yourself of it all.
Right. Because the brain can only hold so much stuff. And with as many books as you both read, I was just wondering, how do you measure that retention thing? But that's one way of learning. And I know you've read a lot about the brain and done a lot of research too. You wanted to learn new skills, which you have done with the podcast, and you learned that you shouldn't sing at the end of them. You wanted to work on your verbal tics, which I believe you've been successful at. How do you feel on that goal?
It's still, it was quite interesting at the start when we worked on them. Over time, different ones would sort of pop out, and like all of a sudden you just a phrase you've never said before, you say 6 times in an episode, and then you listen back and you're, where the hell did that come from? So I think it's a never ending journey. That one, it's verbal tics. It's difficult. I think it's easy. I think you do it very well, Laurel. Chatting with you right now, you speak very clear and slowly and measured and quite precisely. So landing somewhere like that eventually is the end goal. But just through practice and practice alone, you do get much better. Before starting the podcast, I was quite a hopeless communicator, and yeah, it's something a podcast can really help you with.
When you do listen to yourself later, it's amazing how many you find, and you don't realize some of the things that you do. So I think you're doing
And
great.
do you have any tics, Laurel, that you're
I
working on?
do. I have ums, and
Mm,
it's funny because in a little bit of stuttering, and I noticed that in a lot of people. A lot of people on the news, on different talk shows, they have a little bit of a stutter, and
mm,
I just think that's normal. And so I'm accepting it as something that I do. But
I like it.
yeah,
I
back in the
think
day when I was
yeah,
younger, when my dad was still alive, the word like was just imbued in everything. The Valley Girl talk. I don't know if you've heard of Valley Girl talk over there
mhm,
in Australia, but the like, everything's
gotcha.
like.
Mm.
And my father he would get very angry about that. So I don't think I do that at all because of
Yeah.
dad.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think a little bit of imperfection's almost a good thing in communication. Sometimes when it's just too perfect and too presented, it doesn't resonate as well with just a little bit of a tick. But having said that, sometimes it can get annoying if you're repeating the same tick all the time to a listener.
So you have become more articulate. That was one of your goals. How about reducing your fear and getting outside your comfort zone? That's a big thing that I believe in and I've done all my life, just push myself out of my comfort zone. But have you reduced your fear of doing things like this interview?
100%, in very big ways. So a lot of the books we read at the start, especially the motivation ones, the good ones had an element of getting out of your comfort zone because if you read books and then all of a sudden your goals you set to be a little bit higher than what you've got now, the only way to get there is to actually grow into someone different that can maybe go after something a bit different. And getting out your comfort zone is just part of that equation if you really want to be doing anything. And it comes in different forms in different ways in books. I'd say Stoic philosophy, like Ryan Holiday's Obstacle is the Way, articulates it in terms of viewing the obstacle as something positive that you need to move towards. Tim Ferriss for us had Comfort Challenges. Daring Greatly by Brene Brown talks about hopping into the arena. There's so many. Nassim Taleb, who's another great philosopher, I think, in Anti-Fragile, talks about tinkering, and that's experimenting with things and seeing failure as not necessarily a loss, or error is not a loss, error being an investment. So I think stumbling into new areas where you're uncomfortable, so many different books attack it from different angles, but that's probably the sign of something that's true when it's hit from so many different angles about the way to live a good life. Um, and then I think if you can, I think early days, what I tried to do and still trying to do ongoing is reframing what that feeling of discomfort is in the body. Like the night before you go to bed. Oh, sorry, the day you go to bed before you're doing something that's big, and you have that nervous feeling in your stomach, and reframing that in your mind, like actually, this is where I want to be. This is the feeling of growth and change. I'm learning something new. Um, and actually, the opposite, when you don't have that feeling for a long time, you think, all right, why am I actually not challenging myself in life? What else is out there for me to go and try and do? So I think that nervous feeling is a bit of a gauge of a North Star that you're growing anywhere. So I think it's like you said, a really important thing.
I absolutely agree with you. And I just believe that if you don't challenge yourself, you don't grow. I mean, if you stay in a comfort zone, then you're safe, but how do you know what your capabilities are if you don't push the edges? Yeah.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
incredible thing to flick the switch in your mind, and I think it changes your trajectory entirely. because being comfortable and safe, it's pretty cool and great for the moment. But if you look back, like from the end, beginning from the end in mind, looking back to where you are now, and there's two paths you could take. What's more painful? Is it the present moment discomfort, or is it the potential of regret at the very end that you lived a life where, yes, you were comfortable, but you didn't take the path which is going to challenge and grow, where you actually reach your potential to, yeah, do something interesting with the finite time we've got kicking it on Earth here. Wow, that's deep.
No, it is. And I believe somewhere in here, I can't remember exactly which tab I tabbed. I won't look through there now, but somewhere in there was the suggestion that if you are nervous about something, go to the extreme. I think it was like negative visualization in there where you actually go to think about what is the worst thing that can happen. And then you back up from there, because probably the worst thing that could happen isn't going to. So I know you cover this in this book too.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's another thing that's covered in different ways in different books is if you visualize the worst, it does two things really. It's again, it's another Stoic idea, um, which comes up. And if you visualize, and it goes the opposite against, say, what the law of attraction is, right? Where you're visualizing the very best about what's going to happen to you, which may or may not happen, depending on what you do about it. But visualizing the very worst, where you wake up, you visualize something awful happening in your life. It sounds morbid, but let's say you've visualized something bad or health going on with your partner. When they wake up and you speak to them, you're just going to be full of gratitude that they're still around, and you're going to appreciate their presence. So in that context, it's very helpful. But in the context of projects or your life, if you take a risk or something like that, the worst case scenario is not that scary most of the time. And a lot of the time, you can actually provide insurance against it, provide some actions to protect the downside. So the riskiest things that can happen to you, you can actually protect from, and then so you're just left with upside in whatever your actions are trying to be.
I love it. So tell me, this book, and for those of you just joining, we are here with Adam Jones, all the way from Australia, co-author of the book, The SH Star T They Never Taught You. How is this book different from other knowledge compilations? I originally was going to ask how it's different from other self-help books, but this really isn't a self-help book, although there's stuff in here about all kinds of things, relationships, all kinds of things. But there are other compilations of knowledge out there. How is this 686 page book different?
Great question, Laurel. I think the first iteration we went off and did a knowledge compilation in writing our top 100 books of all time, which was a similar thickness of that book. We threw it out there, and that was just pure knowledge compilation. We got feedback from listeners and friends, and they said, "Hey, sorry boys, this is pretty boring stuff to actually get through. I'm not interested in half the books. They got no relevance to me. I don't care about history or physics, or I don't care about personal development. I care about marketing, whatever they might be, because everyone's quite different what they want from books." So I think it's different in where we landed in the next few iterations beyond that. So what we've learned on our podcasting journey is, say if you're really trying to deliver a lesson, there's two components that you need to bring with it. You got the bricks, which might be just the lesson, but then you got the mortar, like how do you make it stick together and enter into your framework of your mind. The mortar for us is the stories. You need compelling stories that aren't long enough that they're going to be irrelevant, but short enough that they deliver the point. So it's much easier to remember something that's delivered within a story. So over time, what we did is we rather than just having 100 dry books, we added a lot more stories, personal anecdotes, pop culture references, sort of thing. And it makes it much more of an entertaining read, I think, as you go, but then also you learn so much along the way. So yeah, for us, that's one part. And then the other one was we grouped all the components into different lessons and different parts. So I might not get them all off the top of my head, but part one, getting your SH together. So all about personal development, improvement, marketing, business, history, personal finance, philosophy. And I'm sure I've forgotten a couple in there, but
You have so many, but my favorite section is non-wanker philosophy. That's at the end. And what I would say about this is, and you hit it right too, adding your own voice to this. These are bite-sized ideas for readers to peruse and consider with your voices and your Australian dialect, which comes through. Every time I see the word whilst, I giggled.
Is that right? Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, that's the goal, right? If you're reading a book, there's some totally rational component where you're just learning something, but there's some kind of intuitive connection that you get to the book as well, where you've hopefully got the voice from the reader coming through. And I think that's what we also tried to land on. The way we've done the podcasts over the years, we've landed on our own sort of style, which we tried to put through the book as well with our own voices.
And so Adam Ashton is not here right now. So you can be honest with me and tell me who's the boss.
I like it. So you mentioned my name was on the front of the book. The first one pops up. I think everyone would prefer something a bit more juicy, but we just flipped a coin for that one, Laurel. So it's a bit of coin flipping. We cycle a little bit, I think, in terms of who's got the most interest in the book we're reviewing a little bit. But yeah, I don't think there's necessarily a boss between us. There are times where each of us assemble the Batman role and the Robin role. We actually call it like that together. You know, before an interview, it might be, hey, I'll go Batman for this one, or I'll go Batman and you go Robin. So I think we cycle through and yeah, we have different times where each of us have to step up and be the one driving things. And we've got a very interesting and great working relationship, which we've landed on over the years, I think.
I think that's fabulous. And I figured that your name went first on the book because alphabetically his name would come first all the time anyway. And he probably just decided that he was going to let you have this one as you have in the first name. But I think that's wonderful. How do you select the next book that you're going to read? Now, I did a little bit of research, and in the Atlantic article back in 2010, so that was a few years ago, there were exactly 129,864,880 books in the world.
Wow. Are you
That was in
serious?
2010.
That's insane.
Well, that's what the interwebs told me.
Totally.
So
I believe that.
how do you pick the next book that you're going to assess?
Well, I think there's a few components that go into this equation of book selection for us. Really important one is just curiosity. Like, so I personally, I'm always buying more books than I'm reading. So over time, you got a bookshelf that's well and truly more than you can possibly get through in a lifetime, sort of thing. So when is the time for the next book? You got plenty to actually go through and flick through, and something jump out at you depending on where you might be sitting and whatever challenges you might be facing at the moment, or where your just general curiosity lies. So that's a big part of it. I'd say another element is also what the listeners are after. So if it's for the podcast specifically, we're going to make sure we can put something together which will be an interesting episode for everyone listening, and making sure that they can learn at least one thing from what we're trying to put together in the podcast. And in a similar vein, thirdly, is just getting the wide variety of books. Like, so you can read 300 books that are the same book, or you can read 300 different books. So because some books, they're covering the same ground, doing the same sort of stuff, which is, I think, really important in one sense, because the most important concepts gets traction in your brain through the repetition. But yeah, it's also important to just go wide, because you don't know what tool you're going to need in your toolkit. I'll give you one example. One book or a category of books I'd probably avoid naturally and not really look for is a lot of the love category books, like how to romance and things like that. And they've been quite a impactful in my life, like The Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman. Very simple framework, which I'd never pick up a book like that. But after you read that, it's very hard to treat relationships differently. There's 5 different love languages. You might be one language. It might be acts of service, where your partner is really helping and maybe cleaning the house, or giving, or taking you out for dinner, or doing things like that. But their love language might be gifts. So you actually need to go and say, hey, I was thinking of you today and I bought you this gift. But if you don't understand what each other's language is, you might be speaking Spanish and they're speaking English your whole relationship. So by learning that and just reading that book, you can understand and have that conversation like, hey, out of these 5, what's your language? And then your relationship and your emotional love tank, he calls it, it's always full. And then you're going through life as a partnership. But that's something like I'd never, ever really pick up something like that. Go to the business section, marketing, personal finance, personal growth, all that kind of stuff. So wide has been really important in selection.
And what you were talking about, the 5 love languages, that all comes down to communication too. The co-author of the book we most recently wrote, called Piece by Piece, 10 Lessons from a Jigsaw Puzzle. My co-author, Nadine Collier, is a licensed professional counselor. And we reference exactly that in our book, the 5 love languages. So yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Familiar with it. And we've got some thunder going on here in the background. So if you hear any like loud noises in the background, I can't mute those out. So you'll just have to.
Adds to the atmosphere.
The ambiance. You recently read or reviewed Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is a 40-year-old book. I recently read, and here's one for you. It's called Ordinary Magic by Todd Fonstock. He's a local author, and he, like in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, he hiked the Colorado Trail with his 14-year-old son, Dash. And so that story, I just finished reading it, and it is fabulous. So that's one I might recommend for you. But I also asked our local bookstore owner, John Cameron, owner of Salida Books here, about his nonfiction recommendations for you guys. And he suggested one called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Coonerer, I think, Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass. And another one that he said was just a sleeper that he absolutely loved, called Midnight in Chernobyl, about the whole Chernobyl thing, by Adam Higginbottom. So those are ones that you could consider.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I haven't heard of any of them, to be honest, which is exciting. Some of those ones you haven't heard, but are personal recommendations. A lot of the time they're real winners. So I'll look forward to buying them.
And John Cameron, he does TikTok. Are you guys on TikTok yet?
We're not on TikTok. We're I don't know if we missed the boat. Is it too late to jump on the boat?
I don't think it's too late to jump on. He's got a TikTok account at Salida Books, and it's wonderful. And he does little 40-second book reviews. So he also does fun things on it. But you should look him up and maybe think about that too, because he's got a whole young audience following him, which is wonderful. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Add that to your list.
I'm interested, Laura. Did you read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance?
Probably when I was your age, and that was a few years ago.
What did you think of it? I'm interested to know if you remember, just like generally good.
Well, generally like a general vague memory. You talk about retention, right? In books that you've just read and forgotten about because you didn't write a book report on them or whatever. But generally speaking, I remember that I felt good about it. I felt good about it. Was a positive message. It kind of like The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. I read that right when it came out. So again, that was a while ago. And that was life-changing to me. Yeah. It really made me appreciate things like right now, being with you. You're in Australia. I'm in Salida, Colorado. How crazy is this and how wonderful is this? It's
absolutely wonderful. And it's interesting. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Ashna and I have never disagreed more about a book, which is so I like to find allies to get on my side and say, hey, Ashna, Laurel's on my side. She loves it.
What did he not like about it? Or maybe he should speak for himself.
Oh, no, it's all right. I can speak on Astro's behalf, realizing I'll be imperfect, but there is a lot of fat in the book where it's just, talking about we're on this motorcycle, with my son going on this journey, and it's just seemingly talking about nothing. So 90% of it's a bit of that, and then only 10% of it's actually talking about what the point of the book is, and it's makes you work really hard in the book, I think. Um, so he didn't finish it actually. It was one of the first books we've reviewed that it was the only book we reviewed he didn't finish. That's how much he didn't enjoy it. But there you
So
go. We didn't.
you don't finish every book you start, do you?
We do almost every time, but this is the first time Astro didn't uh, finish the book. So we've finished every book except for Astro on this one.
Well, suggest to him Ordinary Magic by Todd Fahnestock, and I think he will love it. It made me want to hike the Colorado Trail.
I like
It
it.
really did.
Well, we'll get on it. And Power of
All
Now
right.
is absolutely beautiful as well, isn't it? I remember it was too much when I first read it. This is before it was actually one of the first books I ever read. And I was in India doing like a yoga retreat or something because you're well outside of my comfort zone sort of thing. And I had to put it down because you just have to, it's the first time you're watching your brain chatter and run away. It's quite overwhelming if you've never actually stepped back and not meditated on your mind and looked at it and seeing how wild it actually goes. Um, I had to put it down. It took me a few years later to pick it back up and read the whole thing. So quite a powerful book.
What you can learn from books, lots. And again, we're not going to get to all my tabs, but you have interviewed some pretty big names. What was the most challenging interview you did?
That's a good question. The most challenging, I'd say, to be honest, would be um, the first one. Even though it's a bit of a lame answer, but it's just that it was the first time we've ever done an interview. Even though we didn't have much of an audience, you're worried about how you might sound to the author and everything like that. So I think just the discomfort of the first one would be the most challenging. And then over time, like anything, you get bigger and bigger authors on, and you'll be nervous sometimes for that. But over time, it gets much easier. But I think it's the most difficult at the start when you're first taking those first steps in doing it. It's scary as hell at the start. But yeah, since then, I think all the authors we've had, they haven't really challenged us back or been rude or mean to us or challenged us directly backwards. It's always been a bit of a one-way sort of interview a lot of the time.
Well, I would hope no one would be mean to you because that's just rude. But I still get nervous. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but honestly, I still get nervous. Any new job I've started, any new interview I do, because again, like you said, you want to do well. And there's little bit of the imposter syndrome going on there as well, I
Mm.
think. But one thing that you mentioned, my husband had a question. He was wondering if during or if any of your interviews with authors have ever changed your opinion about their books.
Uh, that's another wonderful question. Hmm. I think I'd say one improved our impression of the book, made us revise what was originally in it. And that was when we spoke with Simon Sinek. We know he's very popular and everyone loves him for his TED talks and whatnot. But just behind the scenes, Astro and I, we weren't that impressed with his books. We didn't think he was coming up with that wild insights that required a 300-page book that he was writing for publishers. So we interviewed him after we read The Infinite Game, which is his third in the series. And I think after speaking to him, because it was right as coronavirus hit, we got him at a pretty wonderful time. And just the importance of that mindset of playing the infinite game rather than the finite game. I think the people who played that and looked at the longer term picture and had all their decisions and actions for the longer term, they would have been a very different outcome where people are sitting today, only 12 months later. So I think after speaking to him, we're like, wow, that's actually one hell of an idea he's pulled into this book. And the framework for the infinite game, I don't remember exactly off the top of our head, but how businesses can get through that time focusing on a just cause uh, and having infinite horizons and having that element of play important. So I think, yeah, Simon Sinek impressed us. He probably should have impressed us beforehand, but I think after we're like, hey, no, he's one hell of a human being with some incredible insights.
That's awesome. Our local bookstore owner kept his doors open through the pandemic by doing like an Uber book delivery. He was delivering books on his bike, which was amazing. How has the pandemic affected you?
Me personally, there's always a bit of guilt in a sense saying I got so much out of it and enjoyed it, but it's definitely the truth. It's the world got hit. We all got hit, had to work from home. I didn't lose my job, so I was very fortunate compared to a whole bunch of other people who are out there. We were in isolation, so we had Melbourne, I'd say, had one of the biggest lockdowns in the world. I don't know exactly, what happened everywhere in the world, but ours was about 12 weeks, just full isolation at home. Essentially, you can only go out for shopping, but I absolutely loved it. The peace and quiet of having the calendar whites. You can be more productive getting through your work at home. If it wasn't for the pandemic and having so much time up the sleeve, we wouldn't have done the second and third iteration of the book. We would have put something out which was very bland and boring. So I think luckily both Asho and I, we try to see it as an opportunity of Robert Greene. He talks about in one of his books, dead time versus alive time.
Yes.
When something, all about that. So when something hits, let's say if you go to jail or something like that, you can be dead time and just be miserable and waste your life away in jail. But you can see this as a lifetime as an opportunity to go out there and write a book or do something important. So there's a lot of authors who have actually written books in jail and come out, um, or Nelson Mandela. What he did in jail was just build his compassion and use that to make a huge impact on the world. So yeah, no matter what happens, there's two ways of looking at it. The optimistic way is making the most of the opportunities that might be there, that can grow from the ashes.
And again, you don't have to go to jail to experience dead time versus live time. You could be in a long line in a supermarket and you can either complain about it or you can learn something from the people in the line or have a book with you. Have a book with you. And for those of you just joining, we are still here with Adam Jones, co-author of the book, The SH Startee They Never Taught You. You recently interviewed and Asho recently interviewed Daniel Kahneman. And during that interview, he said, writing the book was torture. Now, I can't remember whether he was talking about Thinking Fast and Slow or Noise, but I'm wondering about your book. Was writing this book torture?
It
And by the way,
certainly was.
congratulations on interviewing Daniel Kahneman.
Thank you so much. He was high. He's been one of the highest on our list for a very long time. It was torture. Absolutely was torture, Laurel. The first iteration we did, so the first version, that was pretty easy, right? It was a lot of fun. We did it in 2 months. It was quick and dirty, and um, we thought we were 100% there. We were probably 30% of the way there. But beyond that, I think the run from 80% to 100%, so nearly finished to finish, is 100% painful because you've got all the content down. From there, it's just editing, rewriting, just finicky touches, picking up typos, spelling mistakes, repetition of sentences and phrases. Then you got the typesetting, which is also absolutely necessary to nail and get right, but pretty bloody boring if you're just trying to write.
Drudgery. Mhm.
It's drudgery, isn't it? You know all about that. The design of the book, then the printing at the end, printing it and then checking it, and then I think at the very end we went from gloss to matte, changed the paper around, and we landed at something we were happy with. But yeah, it was torture at the end, and there was part of us just wanting to say, "Hey, we're done. Let's just leave it here. Don't worry about um, don't worry about where it's going to go from here." But I think the most torturous part was I remember when we thought we were 100% finished. There was one phrase that repeated itself in the book, and we're like, "Oh my god!" And we released it at that stage. We're like, "Oh, are we going to fix it, or we're just going to let it go?" And
What was it? What was it?
it was my fault. I was toward I forget exactly, but it was part of my story, I said the same thing twice, exact same sentence twice in different places. Like when writing it, I probably would have copied and pasted it and thought, hey, that makes more sense to go here, and then not, not deleted it. So I on the clumsy one out of me and Ashto, we got a good
I don't,
combination where
I don't
he's
believe it.
much more rational and pick up things, and I'm quite clumsy and might be a bit more risky in some of the things, but yeah, it's our dynamic that lands somewhere pretty good.
Well, I would say the torture ended up producing something pretty wonderful. How did this book change you? How did writing this book change you?
Many ways. I'd say the most profound for me was I never used to think I was a writer. I used to think I was poor, absolutely poor at writing when it comes to even just little things like emails or memos, or um, I'm an engineer by trade as well, so engineering reports, something I'd really try and avoid. But after that book, I'm just extremely confident that I'm a writer. So I think I've just bought into that identity a little bit, and it's just added that skill to the toolkit that I can write in any context. Just need to get into a bit of flow and get there. So writing's one, but also just completing a big project. I think one of our favorite books is Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art. He's got three of them: War of Art, Turning Pro, and more recently, Do the Work, which were
Have them
Do the
all.
Work. You got them all?
Oh, yes, read them all.
They're beautiful books, but you're going to battle the resistance whenever you do a big project. The resistance is out to kill you or kill your dreams, because it's what stops between your currently lived life and the unlived life and fulfilling your potential. I think after you defeat the resistance once on a very big project, it just gives you really confidence that you can go out and you can battle the resistance, the things that are just going to be pushing you back on a big project. So going forward, we've never done a project as big as this one, 680 pages of a big book.
686.
Yeah, that's it. But going forward, if we do another book that's 300 pages, is not going to seem like a big deal, or any other sort of project. It's not going to seem like a big deal compared to what we accomplished with this one.
What was the most enjoyable chapter for you to research? And there are lots of chapters, so that might be a hard question, but maybe the most enjoyable section.
I'd say for me, it's the evolution one. It was apes to atoms and beyond. Just the complexity and challenge we had, because all the books in this one lesson were huge mammoth books. So I think we started with The Selfish Gene, went into Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs and Steel, then went into Sapiens, then went into by Yuval Noah Harari, followed by 21 Lessons for the 21st Century and Homo Deus. So we tracked from the very beginning, before evolution began, with The Selfish Gene, talking about the theory of evolution, as expressed by Richard Dawkins, which is a very hard book in itself to summarize. And then linking that to why society developed from that point, and how we co-evolved with animals and agriculture and domesticated plants and animals, and then all the way through to the present, the challenges we've evolved as a species. And we had another book, Lessons of History, lessons we've learned along the way. And then at the very end, looking at Homo Deus, like where is humanity now and where is it going into in the future? So I think it's just enjoyable because that just out of the complexity that was across that whole realm. And I think it clicked in us weaving together a natural arc of us as a species, our challenges in the past, how we evolved, and where we're going to spend our resources and time as a species moving toward the future. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. A lot of pain at the time writing, but a lot of fun at the end when we finally got that to click.
And I love the wordplay that you had in there, apes to atoms, and of course, atoms, and you're both atoms. So that made me giggle too. So thanks for making me giggle several times in this book. So one of the books you read had you quit smoking, right?
Yeah, that's right. I was a pack-a-day smoker. I was a bit of a party animal, took party drugs. I was doing university at the time, so I was doing something right. So my motto was work hard and party hard, but but the partying was meaning I was just like just getting by when it came to my university at the time. And if I think back and see what that trajectory would lead me to, it's a bit scary. It's a bit painful to think where I'd be right now if I didn't come across this one book, Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking. And not only did it make me quit smoking, it actually made me really enjoy the process, which is 100% bizarre because before that I was thinking, how the hell can a book make me quit smoking? And that's exactly what it did. And the average smoker spends, I think, 1.3 US million dollars or something bizarre like that, that the costs on smoking. Then the cost on life is like an additional, say, 5 years on planet Earth. So work out the return on investment on one book, which is $30 and took me 8 or 9 hours to read. And I'm getting $1 million in return plus an extra 5 years of life. So for me, that's really exactly where the reading journey began. I was blown away by what one book did for me. I realized this is the best investment that I'm ever going to make, and that's from books. So I went out there and I've never worried about pulling out the card about buying 2, 3, 4, 5, how many books. If it looks good, I won't even look at the price. I'll go out and buy it because I know how much of an impact it can make. After that, I swapped the habit, the dirty, disgusting habit of smoking, for an equally positive habit in the opposite direction, and that was reading. So that's where it all began. I get very excited talking about this book because if anyone's listening right now and is a smoker, or anyone they love who's a smoker, stop what you're doing. No offense, just stop this podcast right now, pull out your card, go to Amazon and buy The Easy Way to Stop Smoking for yourself, and read it, because that'll change your life. Or if you give it to someone as a gift this upcoming Christmas and you convince them to read it, it'll change their life also.
That's amazing. My father smoked for 40 years and gave it up one Lent and just did cold turkey. This was a million years ago. I don't even remember him smoking, but sometimes willpower is not enough. So I'm not a smoker, but I'm going to get this book because I'm fascinated that, well, maybe I could apply it to some other vice I might have. So do you have any other vices?
Oh, I do. I got plenty of vices. I think alcohol's okay for me. I've went through cycles where I actually read Alan Carr's Easy Way to Control Your Alcohol because I was very boozy. Like the day I quit smoking, when you quit smoking, the book says go out and celebrate. So I went out and celebrated and had a huge night on the booze and woke up. But I was still delighted, even though I was so drunk the night before. I still didn't have a ciggy, right? But after that, I read that book and I stopped drinking for 2 years. And since then I've started drinking again, but more of a normal rate as you do, glass of wine, nothing wrong with that. But I think the one that's manifested and pops its head up over time is coffee now, which is a little bit cleaner than smoking. But at my peak, I was 6 cups a day. Now I'm probably at 3 to 5.
Ooh, ooh.
Yeah,
that's a lot. That would make my heart go pitter patter big time. Mine's chocolate. I'm a chocoholic. I came out to my husband as a chocoholic probably about 20 years ago, and he looked at me like I had 3 heads because he said, there's no such thing as that. You're making it up. What does that even mean? And so then I had to confess to him all the chocolate I was consuming. And like every time I'd go to the food store, then there's the candy bars, right there at the checkout. And so Snickers really satisfies you. And I'd eat it on the way home, and I'd hide the wrapper somewhere. I mean, like every time I went out, there would be chocolate. So, and I'd buy the 2-pound bag of chocolate chips to make chocolate chip cookies for the boys, and there would never be any cookies, but the chocolate chips would always be gone. So, yeah, I have a chocolate.
Are you still challenging with that one? Are you still battling that one, or you got rid of it?
I am still battling that one. If it's in the house, it's not in the house for long. So I just don't buy it. So I'm going to buy that book about quitting smoking and see if it'll work for chocolate too.
He's got for the different, he's actually passed away now, Alan Carr, but his organization that he left behind, it does cover almost every vice, including coffee, which it's only an 80-page book, but I didn't finish it. I started it, and then the brain comes up with all sorts of excuses, like when you try and stop any vice, like smoking used to be for me. You go, oh, you got that important meeting next week. You're going to need coffee. You can't be going through withdrawals then, or you got something on the weekend. So I had that playing through the brain.
Rationalization. Yeah.
Yep, which again is probably the resistance coming through, like Stephen Pressfield's War of Art, and that killed me with the coffee one. So I haven't quit that vice, but I think he's got one. I think there'll be one out there for chocolate for sure. Like we were saying at the start, what he does, it's very different to using willpower, because he reframes what you're doing from being something like you're giving up to something that you're actually gaining. So he actually gets rid of all the reasons for say, for example, smoking, goes through all 8 of them, knocks them out of the park with very logical reasons why they're all just stupid. Like you smoke for stress or after a meal, the taste, or socializing. And then after that, you think by the very end of the book, you can't wait to stop smoking. You just can't wait for it. And then you just
Wow.
jump out, and it's so easy. It's so easy once you shift your brain from away from like you're giving something up to something you're moving towards too, and something you're gaining. It's incredibly easy to quit smoking. And the same reframe, I'm sure, will happen with chocolate, where all the reasons you think you like chocolate, you'll reframe. And then I think it's called cognitive behavioral therapy, or I don't know much about that field, but it's got a bit of this a field behind it, field of research and whatnot.
Kind of like the idea that for a task, instead of saying, I have to do this, you say, I get to do this. Something like that.
Yeah, the reframing is powerful. Like we're talking about the comfort challenges, like that nervous feeling in the stomach, reframe that as something positive, and then you actually move towards that feeling. So the reframing can have a powerful effect.
Adam Jones, you have interviewed big names with your buddy Adam Ashton. You've written this tome, this book, this fun book, again packed with easily digestible tidbits to think about. You've obviously made your moms proud, both of you. What's next?
Such a good question. I think for our podcast, and the podcast is sort of a hobby / business. We got ads and we got some income, but we still see it as a hobby. We still got day jobs and things like that. But I'd say the most important thing is to a concept by Jim Collins in Built to Last. It talks about preserve the core and stimulate progress. So in the context of the podcast, it's keeping on doing what we're doing, the core of being the podcast, going through the best bits of the books, but always stimulating progress. And that means making changes, like Nassim Taleb says in Anti-Fragile, just tweak and tinker and change things. And with the optionality, if it works, you can add it. If it doesn't work, you can drop it and move on to something else. So if you're constantly tinkering and evolving, then hopefully in 5 years, I can't guess exactly what it's going to be. If we're doing it right, it means in 5 years' time, we've evolved into something that's quite a bit different and quite a bit better than what we're doing now. Eventually, I'd say there'd be more books on the way, but right now it's just promoting the current book and continuing what we're doing and going through the best bits of the best books and helping people around the world access the ideas in books.
Adam Jones, co-author of the SH Startee, They Never Taught You What You Can Learn from Books. You can get this book on Amazon, yes, in hardback. And I understand audio as well.
Yeah, it's right now you can buy through us through our website, the audiobook. There's a 50% off deal right now. Also, very soon, it's going to be on Audible and all the other platforms. But yeah, buying through us, we can control the price a lot more and put the discount on there. And we've got all the links to all the different distributors who are currently selling our book.
Awesome. I will have links and photos. You need to send me a couple photos of you and Ashto. And I'll have links and photos to this episode and the things we talked about in your book on my blog at leadvillelaurel.com. I'm still Leadville Laurel, even though I live in Salida, because, Leadville Laurel has that great alliteration. So that's my website where my blog is too. Adam, you have been an amazing guest. Don't tell Ashto, I'm kind of glad maybe I just got to interview you, but if he wants to answer the questions himself, he can get in touch with me. I'm sad that we didn't get to meet him today too, but thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to tell our audience?
Thanks so much for having me, Laurel. Is one thing I always like to end on: read books and do the proverbial. So read books and do stuff. Reading, it's just one part of the equation. Going out there, trying new things and doing things, that has to be part of the equation too. You can get trapped in self-improvement sometimes where you're just reading and learning and think you're making progress. But if you're not trying things, then you're really not getting anywhere. So I think important to just leave us with that second half of the equation.
Read and then take action, right?
That's right.
All right, Adam, thank you very much, and stay safe, stay well. And if I make it to Australia, I'll look you up. If you ever make it to Colorado, you got a place to stay. I'll even feed you fresh duck eggs from my ducks.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. Absolutely. We'll hit you up for that. But yeah, we're both based in Melbourne. So 100% we'll catch up for dinner or lunch or whatever if you find yourself here.
All righty. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.